But then you have spinoffs like us that do security. Well, construction security is a huge issue because there's so much equipment stolen off of job sites. And so the security requirement is there for every single commercial project. But your development of this organization has brought together contractors that can now work together. Like, they're all vetted, right? Like, financially, background, the corporate side, the projects they've worked. Like, there's so much collaboration there. And I think that that's where the growth of these kinds of programs could really spin off.
Welcome, everybody, to the Construction MF'ers podcast. I'm your host, Scott Pieper. Today, I have a great guest with me. Someone who's a great American and a patriot, an entrepreneur, is going to share his story. He's got an amazing background, which I'm going to let him get into. Nick Rabenau. He is the CEO and president of Integrous Risk Solutions. And welcome to our show, man.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. I was
How you
looking
doing?
forward to this.
Yes, me too.
Good.
And I really appreciate you taking the time amongst many other things I know you have going on. But let's just jump right into it. Tell me a little bit today about just your background, what Integrous Risk Solution is, and then we can get into the background and how you got there.
Sure. So our company is Integrous Risk Solutions, and we are a nationwide, and now we're moving to a worldwide risk management and security firm. The company itself has approximately 120 employees, and we focus on security assessments, risk management within clients that may have threats against them, or just have, a nervousness about what's going on in the community or environments that they live in. And so the next step for them, obviously, is electronic security measures and physical security. And that's where we come into play, is we help them shape a plan to assist them in the security measures they need, and then conduct services for them. As far as my background goes, this kind of,
I was gonna say, how'd you even get into this?
Well, way back, I was in the Green Berets back in up until 2003. So my focus was explosives and counterterrorism. I was out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, at 7th Special Forces Group back before it moved to Florida. And so we deployed all the time, focused on counterterrorism. And I just knew I had a passion for the security industry upon exiting the military. And once I got out of the military, I realized that there wasn't many jobs for former Special Forces guys, especially back in 2003. And so what I ended up doing was I jumped on the contracting bandwagon. And it is the companies like Blackwater and Triple Canopy. Back in 2003, they just started spawning up because Iraq was really kicking off and getting really entrenched with foreign soldiers, both from British soldiers, Aussies, Americans, and everybody was going over there and utilizing Iraq as sort of the foothold to control the Middle East. And so I contracted over there for another probably almost 14 and a half years, a total of 20 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, and worked in 43 countries for the military or federal government.
It's a fascinating endeavor. I mean, you were right there in the thick of it from inception, or just shortly after inception. Well, you're in the military through the whole process, including 9/11 and everything leading up to it. But then you really saw the entire last 2 decades that we've been fighting this war. You've been in the trenches of it.
Yes. Yeah. So it's funny, not funny, but 9/11, when that took place, I was actually at Halo School out at Yuma, Arizona. So I was out there skydiving, and we were actually in the plane circling up. And all of a sudden they told us that we have to land. Once we landed, they said that all airspace was locked down and everybody had to ground planes across the United States. And that's how we found out about 9/11. And obviously, we did a lot of ramping up and preparing so we can deploy to Afghanistan for a couple stints to deal with that situation.
So when you first got deployed, were you still in the military, or were you and in the Green Berets, or were you actually now a federal contractor and working in private, but for the federal government?
So I was in the Green Berets deploying all over Central and South America. And then that was focused more on like counter drug and counter narcotics programs. And then when 9/11 happened, we deployed to Afghanistan. I was down on the Pakistan border at a fire base called Shkin, which is probably, if you look back in 2003 and 4, it was back in 2001, 2, and 3, it was the hottest fire base across Afghanistan because it was small. It was right on the border, and everybody would come across at night and attack. So it was definitely an adventure in the Afghanistan days. And then after 2003, that's when I shifted over and went to Iraq and started working as a government contractor. At the beginning, I started doing dignitary protection, so to speak, high threat protection for political members, ambassadors, governing coordinators. Those are all American politicians that are embedded into the Iraqi government, and they essentially work with them to help them balance out a plan and a way forward after the war was over. But obviously they needed security as they moved around Iraq and whatnot. So that's where we fell in as contractors. When I first started going over there, everybody that went over as a contractor on our teams were all either Green Berets, Delta, Navy SEAL, Force Recon Marine, PJs. I mean, like, the talent pool was amazing because everybody was getting out of the military chasing the dollar that was being paid for over there to the American contractors.
Yeah. So Nick, look, with your background and experience, one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on here is, one, mobilization funding helps small businesses all across America. We're patriots. We love America, and we love the foundation of what we built on. And I think having this opportunity is what gives our small business entrepreneurs the chance. Finding funding, dealing with opportunity, ways to go. You've navigated all of that through a great pathway. Construction and the military go very much hand in hand. Most people don't realize there's a lot of construction being done in the military alone.
Oh, and yeah.
I know you've saw that and spoken to that, but if you could help me understand and talk to our audience a little bit about how you started to make that pivot from being in the military, seeing this opportunity, creating this company, and then the pathway that you've taken now, and how you've utilized this experience and your background to create this opportunity. One, first to learn, and then two, taking that learning education and creating opportunity. Kind of walk us through that story.
Yeah, so it was tough. Let's talk about the transition first. When I went from the military to contracting, it was a blessing in disguise because the contracting world was all military guys, and you had to be a certain caliber to do what we were doing over there. And the focus of it was strictly the mission in Iraq. And so it gave you something to focus on, and we had drive and determination, and you had all your buddies over there. So the camaraderie of it was, great. Once I got out of the contracting world back in, I think 2008, I stopped for a little bit, and I went and worked running executive protection and security consulting for a BP oil company for the executive team once the oil spill happened. And then I went back and worked for the counterterrorism side of the State Department overseas. And again, it's the same stuff. So therefore, I was doing training and operational contracts. So therefore, I felt like I was in my element. When I finished contracting overseas and I decided to stay in the States, I have 2 kids that are now grown, but I needed to spend more time at home. I needed to focus on the family and quit chasing this fictitious need to feel like I'm supposed to be over there fighting every single war and being a part of every single, conflict. When I transitioned, it was tough. I remember there was a real good buddy of mine named RW, and he was a Force Recon Marine, his second force. We contracted together. We were in Canada together the last time I saw him, and we were in Canada. I want to say it was about an October timeframe of a year. In December, he called me up and he said, "Hey, I'm looking for a job. Can you help me out?" It was right at Christmas time, and the contracting world, there's really no movement in hiring and shifting guys over during the Christmas time. It's already kind of controlled and set in stone, so you have to wait till the first of the year. Well, he was having money problems, and I offered him money. I said, I'll send you $1,000 right now. And now knowing this, there's 5 of us that are all really close, and the other 4 offered the same thing. He wouldn't accept it. He said, I need a job. And, you know, in a type A personality military guy, we're not good at asking for favors. We're definitely not good at asking to borrow money. And so he wouldn't take it. He committed suicide about 2 weeks later, right before Christmas. I think it was right before Christmas. And he had 2 kids, a fiance, and an ex-wife. Obviously, he lived in Virginia Beach. And I realized that he hit a brick wall. He didn't think he had a solution for his short-term problem. And even though we were his solution for that short-term problem, he wouldn't accept it because of pride. And I told myself that I'll do everything I can from now on to help every single veteran that I know when they transition. So if you were to look at our company, 85%, between 80 and 85% now of our company are veterans. The other 15, 20% are prior military or law enforcement. I'm sorry, prior law enforcement or firefighters. And the firefighter part comes because they work a lot with law enforcement. They're direct support for SWAT teams. They have a lot of medical capabilities and whatnot. And they have the same mentality and structure that military and law enforcement do. So the company derived off of just almost like a nonprofit thought process to where we want to help veterans. We want to help transition veterans into this. So we got our first contract. Actually, the George Floyd riots kicked off up in Minneapolis. We were just up there recently prior to that for the Super Bowl. Myself and the other 2 owners of this company, Chris Eaton and Brian Moorfield, we were up there running executive protection for all the celebrities, the team members and whatnot for the Super Bowl. And they had 10 days worth of a concert program. It was called Super Bowl Live. It was downtown Minneapolis, and we ran the security for that. And then once that was finished, we talked about opening our own company. And then the George Floyd riots kicked off. And the day after that kicked off, I went up there, and over the course of the 2.5 years, I took about at least 100 and some contractors up there to work security. And it was the militaristic security profile that you can, think of: 5'11" tactical pants, body armor, pistol, rifle. And we went up there to secure businesses, because as all the riots and looting was taking place, these residential homeowners that own small businesses were being affected like you couldn't believe. I mean, their businesses downtown were all being ransacked, fire alarms set off, everything was stolen, windows are all broken out. And there was they had no hope, because law enforcement numbers were already down a little bit in Minneapolis when all this kicked off. And then they just drastically dropped with the lack of support from leadership within the city and the PD and whatnot. And so as law enforcement over the course of the 2 years of the George Floyd riots, as the law enforcement declined, somebody had to fill that gap on the security side. Somebody had to help these businesses. And so there was a partnership that kind of collaborated with insurance companies that would allow businesses to utilize funding to provide security for those businesses. And
so let me ask you a question. So this is a direct result of like the defund the police movement, or is it more of a result of just the excessive amount of people coming up there because of the George Floyd event that then all of a sudden triggered this need?
So it was a combination. So when BLM started ramping up and pushing their narrative, right? And it really started to grow legs. Well, there was a big funding source behind this, and everybody knows George Soros has been involved in this ever since the inception. So when the riots actually took off, there was groups of people that were flown into Minneapolis to incite these situations, stayed a week or so, and then went on to the next city. As you can imagine, all these cities started being affected, all these blue cities, so to speak, all the ones that had to protect the narrative versus protecting their own citizens. And so when all this was taking place, the need that we saw actually started with grocery stores. And we worked with another partner company at the time. And we realized that, and so one of the grocery store businesses had right at 13 stores across Minneapolis, and a lot of them were downtown. Well, a lot of the people that live down there that are, excuse me, under the poverty line, they are walking to the grocery store to go get food. So they don't all have means of transportation. They ride the bus, they take the tram that they have throughout the city and whatnot. But when the riots took place, there were curfews. None of those modes of transportation were open. So if the grocery stores got hit, they sell $100,000 a day worth of groceries, each one. If they were to get hit and shut down due to the violence, these people wouldn't have any place to go get food. And then if you, just like the gas stations. And so once you take those, the living aspects out of it, if the grocery stores were to actually shut down, you would have people robbing their neighbors. They would be going door to door around the neighborhoods to steal, to get food, to get whatever it is, because at that point, it's survival of the fittest. And so by us going up there and securing the grocery stores, the value of that is really invaluable. And I know that people don't like to spend money on security because it's expensive, especially in that environment. But the problem is if somebody doesn't secure those locations, the outcome is going to be way worse. And the interesting thing went back then was when we were on locations and we were standing there providing security, they didn't bother us that much. Like all the looters and rioters, like, yeah, they made comments and whatnot, but they really they didn't bother us. We went 2 years of providing the security with 0 incidences. But law enforcement, if you have a badge, they were targeted. And so therefore, we've had law enforcement officers that have resigned from their jobs and came over and now work for us because they don't want that spotlight, but they love the work that they do.
Wow. So you're like a private force just to protect the grocery stores for the people that need to get food.
Yeah.
And then helping them get back and forth. And so how did you decide all of a sudden, like, hey, okay, there's this opportunity that from Minneapolis being the Super Bowl was there. And then of course that followed up right away with this emergent need and problem that needed security. When did the light bulb go off for you? Like, oh, wow, I'm going to turn this into a national or global business. Because, it's not always there's a problem occurring, right? Or maybe there is. So when did that light bulb shift for you to say, you know what, I'm going to use all this skill and this experience from the military years to the private years, and now all of a sudden create Integrous? How did that click?
So at the very end of those riots up there, we were actually subcontracted to a different company at this point. There was a lot of problems with just management and lies from leadership and whatever you want to call it, mismanagement of the company. At that point, we decided, as the 3 of us, because we're all up there together, we decided, we could do this better. And we know there's a need right here. So let's start it in Minneapolis. So even though the company's based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where I live, our whole hub of business operations is in Minneapolis. And our first contract actually was the Minnesota Vikings. The lack of law enforcement support for the stadiums and football games, not because they didn't want to, but because they didn't have the numbers. The attrition of officers leaving is way higher than the number of officers that are going through the academy and actually getting on the department. And so because of that, they needed to figure out, how are we going to secure 66,000 fans? And we went and did a security assessment, one of our other partners, and it was a requirement that was never done before in the NFL. NFL's never had armed security at the caliber of what we were doing for the stadium. But the problem was they realized if they didn't go private in this component of their security, then they're not going to have the security at all. They went through county law enforcement from 4 or 5 counties. They went through all their local PDs around the area as well, and they could not get the support that they needed. So what we did was we said, we can offer this service. We can provide you the armed security. We can have all the marked vehicles that you need, and we could provide essentially all the security that happens outside the stadium before you walk in the front door. That is our portion of it for the armed security component. So that was our first contract. And then we started and rolled into the Target Center for the Timberwolves. Same thing for them. They had the same problem. And so then we started seeing that even the businesses around are feeling the effects from this, because law enforcement can't support the hotels, the apartment buildings, and all these locations that officers used to moonlight at. So really, we have filled in as a component of what law enforcement used to do. We now fill that role up in Minneapolis, and we have built a complete business model around this to where it's self-sustained.
It's fascinating. So I want to draw a couple of conclusions back here, because I mean, I love the story, and I could ask you to tell many of the details inside. But what I think is really cool, and I'm going to bring this back to the entrepreneur journey, is life gives you circumstances that you live, right? When you're starting off, you went in, you get out of high school, you go into the military, you learn and educate through experience. Some of those I'm sure are very difficult. We could probably have a whole podcast just on stories, right? Particularly in South America, and let alone before you get to Iraq. Right. So here you are learning all these things and piggybacking. And I'm one that believes, God provides us opportunities, and they're right in front of our faces often. And we just have to be aware to see them. And, you never know where it's going to pan out. But you learned through all this education and experience, you had these circumstances arise. You've now transitioned this into entrepreneurship. You saw another entrepreneur where you worked do this privately, but not do it well, or do it poorly, or not solve the ultimate problem. Maybe they took care of the problem for customers, but they didn't take care of the problem for their employees and team. And so there's these struggles, right? And then you took your leadership experience, your field experience, and you now take this dive into create your own company with 2 of your other friends and colleagues that went through either the same or similar scenarios. And so you can see, and in the best part that I loved is, in order to create a business, you have to find your purpose and belief. And you wanted to see through the story that you shared with your friend, that as all these folks that come out with this amazing training and passion need somewhere to go, and opening your business to solve this problem for the community and cities and people of them, also attach your purpose to it. And now you're off and running. Did I summarize that correctly?
Yes, probably better than I could.
And that's the part that I think is so cool for folks that are trying to figure out, what am I going to do, or how am I going to do it? You might you might be in a bad job, or you might be working for a bad construction company or manufacturing company, and you hate the way they're doing it, but you're getting great experience. There's still value in what you're doing. And then ultimately, when you do attach your purpose to it and why it's important for you, then you can go through the entrepreneurial journey. So let's talk about that. So now you transition into the entrepreneurial journey. You're now owning your own business. We understand what the problem is. We understand the business, what you're trying to solve, provide security, risk assessments. I mean, all those stories of taking the dignitaries around, making sure the executives at BP, I'm sure taking people from point A to point B in Iraq and Afghanistan was no easy chore, right? And so now you're working in this private sector, and now you're an entrepreneur, and you get all the problems of owning a business come thrown at you. Let's talk a little bit about those.
Yeah. How much time do you have?
Okay.
So on the business ownership side, I mean, you're right. There's hurdle after hurdle. And in Minnesota in particular, for what we do, every single person that does security for you has to be an employee. So everybody has to go through all the background checks that a state employee would for Minnesota. So all of the admin, HR, all of that is just unreal for the amount of work you have to do with 100 and some employees, and then the tracking and management of it. Then on top of that, when you actually start the company, one thing that we all just kind of overlook until it's time to deal with it is insurance. The insurance industry is so expensive for armed security, especially at a stadium, because the security, every security component is looked at as high risk. But when you add guns to it, alcohol, fans, a stadium, I mean, it is astronomical. And so one of the biggest things that we were looking at was, as we grow as a company, we know that we can get business, and we get calls every other day offering us work. And we have to find the balance in the logistical requirements of it, how easy it is to actually staff the job. And then ultimately, which is what we've been talking about, is how do you fund projects? Because for us, the hardest thing is that when somebody calls us and says, we want you to do a project, it's going to be $500,000 a year in gross revenue. But we start working that job and we might not get paid for 15 to 30 days, but yet we still have to pay every 2 weeks for payroll. The payroll cost in the services industry can drown a company. And if you think about the companies and how they fail the first couple of years, well, the reason why, one of the big reasons, is if you don't have the capital to sustain the growth, what you're going to find is that you have to resort to taking high interest loans out because no one trusts you, right? You have a year's worth of bank receivable or bank statements and receivables, and that's it. And so people don't really want to extend themselves from the financial perspective to help a company like that because they just don't know if they're going to get repaid. And if you look at the market right now of what's going on with the banking industry and the rates that are, skyrocketing, everybody's just kind of tightening their bootstraps on who they want to loan to. And so it's much easier to loan to people that they know and that they've been doing business with versus new companies. And so first 2 years for us, it was hard to balance the growth of taking on more work and taking on more employees, which obviously means more management, because every time you add, let's say 30 employees, you need to add a level of management, right? An operations manager, an HR coordinator. There's just so many different aspects to the support side of the company. And so when we were accepting, we do the Vikings, we do the Timberwolves, we do special events for the Minnesota Twins. We now have 8 apartment complexes, and it's just a whole bunch of other clients. And as they increase their number of hours that they want us to work every week, it seems like over the last month, because of what's going on in Israel that's trickling over here to the US, that increases our revenue, and that also increases our payroll. Our payrolls went up 6. It's a multiplier of 6, I think, over the last 6 months. So every 2 weeks, you almost feel like you're stuck in this push-pull where you want to grow the company. You need to bring on more employees to support the contracts, but how long will those contracts last? And because you don't want to have to just downsize, scale back, and let employees go. So it's all a balancing act in this. And I think the biggest factor is the strategic leadership of the company trying to manage that component and then work with organizations like you to make it successful.
So when you talk about like opportunities to finance and you're looking at it and you go into like, let's just talk about going into the traditional bank. So you go into the traditional bank, you have decade or more of military experience working for our country. You have been obviously in the military, you're given great discipline, systems and processes. You've now worked in the industry and have experience in the private sector. And now you have your own business and you're doing work. Certainly the bank can see all of that, a traditional bank, and say to you, oh, here's a line of credit to start your business. Is that fair or no?
Yeah, I wish that was happening. If that happened, your business would not be in existence.
Correct. No doubt. You're 100% right. And so that I was kind of being facetious and funny. So you mentioned like high interest loans, but for folks that don't know what you mean, I wanted to paint that picture of the bank, and like maybe the bank just says yes, maybe the bank doesn't, because I think everyone that hears no from the bank believes that they are the only one hearing no necessarily, and it's not everyone else. And so I said that for you because you have some great experience, and you have learned from our own government. You've learned as being a servant to our country, and you're solving a need that everybody can see and a problem that everyone understands, but yet you still get no. And so it's hard. And so you mentioned high interest loans. Like what opportunities for lending did you have that you went to, and what did you use?
So when we first started, we got a credit card for Chase Bank. It was Chase. We started with our accounts. They give us a 5,000, I think it was a $5,000 limit we started with. You can imagine how much payroll you can cover with $5,000.
Yeah,
and
not much.
and Chase was fair, but they told us that, like, we have guidelines. We need 2 K1s in order to do anything with you. And we're a service disabled veteran owned business. So we get to fall under that SBA side, like the Schedule 7. And so there's opportunities there for us, but it has to wait 2 years. And yes, you can get small loans through the SBA as a minority organization and whatnot, like disabled veterans. But we didn't have any luck with it yet. And so we talked to some of these high interest loan places, and like, if you get on Fundura and they'll give you a 37% interest rate, trying to finagle you to say, oh yeah, we'll give you $50,000, but you're going to pay weekly, and the minute you miss a payment, we're going to come after you for all of your company assets. And so anyways, that is where companies drown, because they look at the small picture of, I'm making some good money, I'll be able to pay these loans back. But they don't realize that if their company is only really bringing in 8 to 10% of net profit, that 37% eats all that up plus 27% more, right? And so it's so easy to get overlooked by that, because you're in the element, you're winning work, you're taking these opportunities. Even in a construction business, you can see subcontractors that kind of get in that cycle where they get offered all this work, but then the primes are like, hey, net 45, net 60, we can't pay you anytime before then. But they take on all the work because they want it, or they're working with a client that they have a good relationship with. And so it grows within that one client. And as that happens, the mismanagement and the misappropriation of funds from the operational oversight, I think that's where we as companies, as small businesses, really take it on the chin. And once you hit 2 years, I think it was 2 years when we met you, at our 2-year mark. When we met you, we had 2 K1s. And so those K1s were essentially a way for us to show that we had 2 years worth of good standing within our industry. And we had the funding that was coming through on more of a cash flow, so to speak, from month to month. But the problem is you always need just a little bit more each month to cover the payroll in the services industry. You don't have enough.
Growing.
Yeah, because you're growing. And when we went from, I remember back when we had 30 employees and we thought, oh my God, we're never going to get more than 30 employees. Like, this is just too much, because every year you have to run training, and the company absorbs all that cost, right? All your, like, for us, it's firearms training and less lethal training, use of force, and all that. So there's just so much to an organization. And I tell you, like, with these other security companies that are out there in the market, I told you I wanted to bring you a bunch of them that I know, like close friends and whatnot, because nowadays the security industry is not competition. There's so much work out there in the security industry that we pass work back and forth to companies all the time, just because our ultimate goal, if you look at the end game, we want to keep the community safe. How do we do that? We all work together. And if we don't work together, then the community is going to suffer as a whole, whether it's a business or residential, or a person that's getting threatened, whatever it is. And so I think that's where we as security companies have really changed. Because if you go back years ago, when there wasn't a huge requirement and military guys are wanting to stand up a security company, there was a lot of cutthroat, a lot of competition. And I think that maybe you experience it in the construction business as well, is that there's so much work out there. There's so many grants. There's so many projects being funded throughout the United States that those large prime contractors will always have work. And so now it's working together to utilize, the equipment and the labor force and whatnot to keep it moving forward.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. And for those of you that were listening, you heard K1s. What I think Nick's referring to is 2 years of tax returns, which each tax return will produce a K1 form for each owner. So that's what the bank's looking at. Is they want to know what your tax returns are for your company business, but as it flows into the individuals, it flows from that K1, and that's what they're going to rely on. But I just want to make a side note of that while everyone's thinking maybe, oh, what is that? But, when you start talking about the financing and you jump into some of these options, talk about what is the most important, just getting the money. And once you get the money, and you mentioned 37%, and if you're operating at, let's say, a 10% margin, right? You have to have 3 times the amount of revenue to produce that 37% that you need to pay back. So in other words, if you're only making 10%, then you need 3x that revenue just to pay back the loan amount that you needed. So if you got 50 grand at 37%, you need to generate 150 grand of revenue at your 10% margin in order to pay back that 37%. It's actually more. It's actually 3.5 times almost. So it's almost 200 grand of revenue. And so it's like, how important is that 50 grand? Well, it's really important. But what also is important is the structure in which you are able to pay it back, right? So you talked about weekly. What was more painful, actually, or what problem showed up first? Was it the cost of the capital, or was it a structure of how you repaid it, or was it some combination of both?
It was a combination of both.
And what did those pain points show up as? Like, where does it go?
Yeah. So it was a combination of both, because when we win a job, let's say that we win a job that's going to be $100,000 over the next 30 days. The payroll on that is approximately, let's just call it 60%, with payroll taxes and all that, or employee taxes and all that. So you just spent 60% of that money, and it has to come out of your pocket first before you can actually receive payment from the invoices. And there are options. You can ask a client to pay 25% upfront, but the chances of you getting that to happen are slim to none, because they're almost acting as a bank for you, right? And they don't do that. And so it's difficult. And I think that because we tried a couple, 2 of those high interest loans, and we got them paid back. That wasn't the problem. But the reason why we got them paid back is because we had a lot of other projects that are going that funded those payments. But if you were just a company that really was just slowly growing and you took a high interest loan out, you're going to have a hard time paying. If you look at a $50,000 loan, they want $3,000 to $4,000 a week back. They want to pay those things off in 6 months. So between their principal and interest, whatever that dollar amount is, they want it in 6 months. So you break that down weekly. And there's, and you find yourself like we did with the Minnesota Vikings. We originally started there with just 30-ish agents providing armed security. Then they come to us and they say, we're having a really hard time getting law enforcement to provide to provide officers, which also come with a vehicle. They wanted us to get 11 vehicles. And so we went and we leased first brand new Honda Ridgelines, had them all wrapped up for the company. And we have 11 vehicles at the stadium every single game. And, but if you're only looking at 11 events at that stadium, is it worth it? And for me, I also have to take a whole nother approach to this with clients. Is that football stadium with 66,000 fans that are all centric to Minneapolis, that is nothing but business development for us. So how do you put a dollar amount value on those vehicles and being a part of that location with supporting 11 events? It's hard to, because there's 66,000 people every single game that are seeing our vehicles out there. They're seeing our agents that are talking to them, professional, they get to see what a true security company is supposed to operate like. And so that right there is where I just take the cost of those vehicles and I allocate it to, okay, that's a business development component. And obviously they're great write-offs too, because now we own them, or we're purchasing them or have purchased them. But I think that's where you just have to find that balance. And like you're saying, when you start doing high interest loans, you get you start to eat your capital up. Any money you've made that's in savings for your company, it's all going to interest. If you did two $50,000 loans in 1 year, you're looking at about 60,000 in interest that year. And they're only 6-month loans. So that 50,000 looks great when you get it in the bank and you make payroll. But it doesn't look so good when you spend the whole 50,000 on your overhead. And now all of a sudden I have a $4,000 a week payment to make.
Yeah.
Like, how do you do it? You're
saying that's if it's in 6 months. So that's not just 30, that's 37% paid back in 6 months. That's not 37% over the year. So it's really almost 74%. Yeah. I mean, it makes it hard to grow.
But I also think, and here's the other side of this, and this is what I love about you guys, you having a podcast. You have developed a business that brings together an industry. And like in your construction industry, you have all kinds of subcontractors that do residential and commercial construction. But then you have spinoffs like us that do security. Well, construction security is a huge issue because there's so much equipment stolen off of job sites. And so the security requirement is there for every single commercial project. But your development of this organization has brought together contractors that can now work together. Like they're all vetted, right? Like financially, background, the corporate side, the projects they've worked. Like there's so much collaboration there. And I think that that's where the growth of these kinds of programs could really spin off. And I think that the problem is there's not enough collaboration with organizations like what you have and businesses. Like there's not many lenders out there or organizations that are so in touch with an industry that they know that when they walk in with a contract that we can fund this project up to a percentage and we can make it happen and trust that when we give the money out, we are set up to where we can receive our money and almost, be guaranteed to get repaid. I think that's missing. And that's why the banks are so separated from the commercial industry and the businesses nowadays, because, if you were to go to Wells Fargo and you wanted to get a car loan, you couldn't have the banker approve it that's sitting in front of you that you apply with. It's going to another state and they're going to approve it based off of a score. And that's it. And so there's no alternatives for support for companies like us. And that's why we're actually looking to bring on a partner investor into this, because we have so much work that we are offered across the United States, but we can only scale so much with the amount of revenue that we're pulling in every single month, based off our quarterlies. And so I think that for us, we're in a recession-proof business. And that's what a lot of people don't realize is the security industry is always going to be there. It might not be as big when everybody's getting along, but like right now, what's going on, we have a 5-year run of it's going to be the biggest market for us. And so we're going to enjoy this. But at the same token, you need to bring people in that can help you collaborate and build that business in the right way. As we grow, we need to have, board members. We need to have managers and members within the LLC. Like there's so many other structuring components that we're in the middle of working through right now, because we're no longer just a small business. And now we have government contracts with FEMA, which opens up a whole new ball of wax.
So, what I think is great about what your point there is that the collaboration between all of the different parties and how your journey that I walked through before, what you learn and how you turn that into a job, and then how you turn that into a purpose, and then how you turn that into a business, and then how you struggled through the business. And then we found you. Our journey at Mobilization Funding, that is no different. Like we tried to try to figure out how, like where we're 10 years in and we're talking about how you and I have married up at the same point in time. Right. But we didn't know how to finance construction when we first started. We thought we did. Right. And our clients and our customers taught us what's important, where their struggles are. It wasn't until 8 years in that we decided to have this podcast or start really putting a camera out and talking about it, because we wanted to realize like how all these things kind of combine and go together. And ultimately, I guess the point I'm trying to make here is I really appreciate you saying that, because it is hard to start a business, and it is hard to find the financing. It's hard to find your purpose. It's hard to figure it all out. But then you get into the business and you got your hands on the wheel and you're like, cool, okay, now I found my purpose. This is going to be easy. And then you just start to figure out the real problems, right? And so now you're dealing with these struggles, and you got people and employees, and where those pain points show up are in your team. It's that same people you're trying to help. And now you're on Wednesday and Thursday trying to figure out how you're going to pay them. And meanwhile, on the back of your head, you're like, I got into this so that I could give them a place to go. And I don't know how I'm going to pay them Friday because I don't have the financing for my ability to grow. And I got to keep growing, because the more I grow, the more opportunity they have. The more I grow, the more I can pay them. Nobody wants to work for the same rate they did today that they are 5 years from now. And so all of a sudden you have this whole new burden on you as a business owner, and you need a finance partner or a source of capital that can help you, either as a lender, or if maybe, like you said, it's an investor, but you need a source of capital. So you're not sitting there saying, oh, my whole purpose I got into this business for, and now I can't pay my people. Like, it's torture.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And it hurts because
there's
so much, because from an employee standpoint, they have bills to pay. And so it's very objective for them. And yes, there's the camaraderie in the military and all that, but they have bills to pay. They have a wife or a girlfriend that's in their ear about getting paid. And for us, it's really, it's heartbreaking, because there's been times where we've been really close on the payroll side. And when you have to send a message out to your employees and say, hey, there might be an issue, we might have to pay you a day later, but we don't know. Like, that is the worst to send to an employee. And I know that all these companies out there, they can fake it and pretend that everything's roses as they grew from the inception, but it's not. And we don't talk about it enough, because in order for us to come up with solutions for this stuff, like what excuse me, what you guys did, you found a niche. You found a way to provide capital to companies that need it, and control the narrative as far as getting repayment. And I like that. I think that's really neat, because all of us do contracts in the services industry, and that contract is essentially the Bible for the project you're working, and everything revolves around it. And so from the finance side, or from the funding side for what you guys do, your goal is to help businesses grow and help put people to work, because that's really what you're doing. If there was not organizations like you guys out there, these subcontractors would get eaten up by the primes in the construction industry, and you wouldn't have small businesses out there doing construction, because they just can't afford it. And they can't afford the interest rates like we're talking about. You can imagine a commercial construction project of a hotel for a plumbing subcontractor, and the amount of equipment that they have to buy up front for materials before they even start the job. It's hard. And so I think they have it just as bad as we do, because they have materials and labor, and we have labor. And so I think that the niche that you found is great. And now I would love to see the continuation of the networking component take place, because I think that is where the growth is going to happen. For instance, you have all these prime contractors that do construction across the United States. We're looking for construction companies to partner with, so we can provide security across the United States for construction projects, because they're usually 6 to 18 months long. Those are good jobs. And I think that the relationships there are phenomenal. No different than you have subcontractors that are looking for work, and primes that are looking to fill jobs in certain areas for subcontract components. And I think you have a perfect segue of helping build the relationship and community. And here's the other cool thing. You have the ability to work with large banks to say, hey, we had this company for 2 years. We've been working with them. They've been financially sound. We built their project financials for every month for the last 2 years. They are now ready to essentially graduate and get a big boy loan. And so now you have the ability to help hand them over. And when they need project money for, something small or something that pops up short notice, they come back to you, because you walked them into a big boy loan for the company to grow. And I think that that's where the component for us, that's where I think the relationship is so important and crucial, that we do everything we say we're going to do as a company for you on the financial side. Because if the minute we start missing payments or not following through with what we say we're going to do, that breaks the relationship, and that eliminates the ability for us to get funding. And honestly, if we didn't have your organization, I don't know where else we would have gone for the last 6 months. And so I do want to bring one thing up. So I obviously I met you through Joe Adam, and he is in the dirt track racing community with us. And the racing community is so fiercely loyal to each other. I mean, yes, you're competitors on the track, but off of the track and in the pits and on the side, like, we have a group of us that are so close, and we'll get on the phone and talk business. We'll throw opportunities back and forth. And Joe, told me about you guys, and he raved about how it worked for him with your guys' four-year relationship. And if we weren't racing buddies, I don't think he'd never told me about that, like, and I'm not saying him personally, but just in general, there's programs and sports and things out there that businesses and business owners are a part of, almost like an association. And I think that's where, when you're a business owner, you have to network. You have to figure out ways, not just to get money, not just to get business, but just overall to build relationships, because you never know when they're going to come into play later on.
Yeah. And helping others is the key integral part to doing that. When you help other people, they're going to be more apt to help you, and you need that help in building those relationships and that bond. And you make a great point, and I think Joe's a great example of that. Your average business owner, they're not going to run around, and the leading way they build relationships is, hey, let me tell you about the lender that I use because I can't make payroll or I almost missed. No, that's not what you do. You go inside or talk about your business. And of course, you let everyone assume that everything's cool and great and perfect. And so that's one of the reasons why I really appreciate you coming on and being so candid, because, telling these stories is real. When you get in the pits, for example, you realize that everyone has the same issues. Everyone's going to go through the same struggles, and then new struggles, depending on where you are in your entrepreneurial journey or your business journey. And, the problems that you dealt with 3 years ago seem like no big deal now, right? And what you're dealing with now is one thing. And the problems you're going to deal with 3 years from now, you need someone in the pits that's been through it to say, hey, here's what you're going to be waiting for. Here's what's coming next. Here's the anticipation. These are ways to prepare. By the way, here's a way to avoid it. That's a novel concept. So, eventually you don't have to learn through pain, individual pain. You can actually learn from people that are ahead of you, your mentors, people you've networked with.
Yeah.
You made a great point about the bank. We've graduated. We have a great partner in Valley Bank, and we've graduated, to use your term, graduated folks from us to them many, many times. And you know what? They've gone and gotten their initial lines of credit, and they've been good for 4, 5, 6 months, and they go through another growth curve and they need us again, and we can work both together. And it's been great. And those are exactly what types of journeys and relationships that we're trying to foster here while businesses are growing. Go ahead. You're going to say something.
Yeah, no. And it's appreciated because, one of the biggest things that we had for a hurdle was vehicles. When we needed those 11 vehicles that I was talking about, it was in the height of the vehicle pandemic where you couldn't get them, right? Diesel trucks, like nothing was available a couple of years ago. And so the dealership that we dealt with, Luther Auto, I mean, they were phenomenal up there in Minnesota. They pulled from 11 dealerships to get 11 trucks there for us. And they leased them for the first year for us. And they were a client of ours. I mean, we've done security for them, but to get a loan for that, like, we now financed them. We had to go through 4 banks. We went through like Chase and Ally and Truist, and I think one more. So we as owners, us 3 owners, we have all of that sitting on our credit. Like we had to, as a guarantor, we had to put our name on the line for them. And I think we're going to be about 1 year away from being able to put all of that on the company. And I think that's another thing that business owners don't realize is that when the first 3 years of your existence, you're going to have to put a lot on your credit report, and your beacon score is going to go down because of that, right? Because your debt to income ratio. And, and until your business can self-sustain financially, in a capacity where you can walk into a bank and the business can take the loan out and not you as an individual. Up until that point, you're going to struggle. And I think that that's where, just finding the balance, like we talked about, finding the balance between the projects that are worth taking on and finding the funding to support that project. And then looking at it from the perspective of, did we gain any business development out of this? Was it an opportunity to show our capabilities to someone new? And then did we make any money off of it? And did we put employees to work? I think those are the three biggest things for us that we, really look at. And it's funny because I've always dabbled in the business side, and I'm really big on the relationships, the entrepreneurship stuff. But up until owning a company, I never realized all of the detail that goes into a company when it comes to just like the softwares that you have to pay for to manage employees and projects and schedules and payroll and billing. And like, it's endless. And so for employees, I think that they don't, because I was an employee once, and I know that I looked at it like, can't they get their stuff together? Like, what are they doing? But I never knew the intricate detail and all of the moving components of a company. And so now that we jumped in feet first, obviously we've gotten it going and we're good. But I think that that's where a whole nother side to what you guys do is the project management side. Just your spreadsheets alone and looking at tracking projects and the overhead and all your line items of how it's broken down, like that really helps shape people that don't know how to do project management or project finance management. And I think that's stuff that you bring to the table that banks don't do that. Not one bank will sit down and say, okay, you got a $2 million project. Let's walk through all the different line items of things that you have to purchase up front. And then let's look at payroll, and then let's add all your other overhead factors in there. And let's see what you got for a profit margin based off of, a monthly schedule. Like, no one does that. And I think that that's where there's a lot of businesses out there missing the mark in the financial industry because they don't have that capability. They don't dig that deep enough into a project or the purpose of a loan from a business to get to the point where not only are they helping this company shape the financial plan for what they're borrowing the money for, but also managing it from a month to month or a week to week, process.
And then where are the pain points so you can adjust to it? You know what decisions to make when you know the problem. The worst thing as a business owner is you don't know what problem's coming, so you don't know what decisions to make. But when you can see it and forecast it in advance, or as many things as you can, then you can start to pull the levers of options that you have through relationships you've built or just knowledge you have.
Yeah. No, and like you said, we could do a whole podcast on just the financial aspects of this stuff because there's so many different ways to go about it. But I think ultimately, if small businesses knew that there's an option other than high interest loans, they would be all over it. I think the biggest thing is just getting the word out there. And then, like I said, just the process of how you guys structure a contract and a loan and then, fund it, I think is really important. A lot of companies, they need that. They need that management from the financial side because it's so easy to get a $50,000 loan and just spend it on nice to haves, right? And next thing you know, you spent the whole 50,000 and you still have payroll in 2 weeks and you still have that high interest payment next Friday. And so the problem you think you fixed 48 hours later turns it into the same problem. It's just now it's complicated because you already leveraged $50,000. And I think that's where businesses, just falter because the mismanagement.
Yeah, having that built-in discipline from the loan product and structure keeps you safe. Actually, it helps you and doesn't hurt you. It actually helps keep you safe. It helps you keep using the money when you need it, have it for what you wanted it for, but also be able to repay it in a structure that fits.
Yeah, and not to get too into the weeds, but I really like the fact that you guys request bank statements every month because it helps companies stay within their parameters when they receive the funds from you guys. and it's allocated for X, Y, and Z, that is exactly what it's spent on, and it's tracked on the bank statement. And I think that that's where it keeps everybody in line and in check when it comes to the finance department of how they do their accounts payable and receivable.
Well, I didn't have you on here to be a commercial, but I think I really am grateful
Sorry.
for what you appreciate in the loan program. You know what I mean? Your perspective on that is certainly very much appreciated, and it's accurate. That is the intent of it. One might look at it like, oh, they don't believe me, they don't trust me, they're just checking up on me, and that's not true either. It's just, in order to be able to do this process that we're doing, which, by the way, no banks want to do, as you've clearly outlined. Mm-hmm. There's got to be ways to be able to do it and prove it out that it works, so that you can help people that want to use it the right way or use it in a manner that works. And so that's really what we're doing.
Yeah.
Well, but again, I appreciate you for your candor, but also your perspective.
Yeah, no, I'm a complete outsider. I didn't know you before, Joe, and I've never heard of your organization. And so I got to come from a complete outsider to getting to know you, to getting to know the business, to being a part of, the loan processes and whatnot. And I think that that's where I can give a complete perspective from, start to finish. And I think that the other thing that I like is the fact that when we restructure stuff, like I get way more invoices than anticipated for the month of November. It's so easy for me to just send everything to Brianna or Yaley, and they just fix it, so to speak, right? Like they can help me with that spreadsheet and readjust it. And the next thing you know, it makes sense to me. So that helps a lot.
Yeah, you mean when the invoices from your customers come in and they're all over the place, and we could just
put
a summary. Yeah.
Well, and that's
helps you. That's what we've said to folks too. What we're doing is helping us, but it's also helping you. And now that's the beauty of this, is we're completely aligned in the project with you. And that's what makes it work.
Yeah. So what's your guys' next step? Like what's your next business goal within the construction side?
Well, I think you've touched on it. It's really to grow. Our goal is to grow. Our goal is to help as many people as we can come in contact with, to give them the information they need, the help and the support, get in front of these businesses so they can help grow and develop and take care of their employees. Everybody has a vision and a journey for their business, and financing is a big component of it. And if you don't have access to that, Nick, there's one other topic I wanted to ask you about, which is it's leadership. We, 4 of us, from our company, just attended the Dirt World Summit. So think with like heavy civil contractors, construction, BuildWit, a great organization, put the summit on. It was 2 days. And one of the things that they did was they brought in Jocko Willink and the Echelon Front, and they taught their leadership principles. And for those folks that have not read the book, Extreme Ownership, it's fantastic and it's great. And I recommend anyone read it. I read it many years ago. But that was the first time I actually heard about leadership. And he took all of the military principles and things that he learned, or they learned together, and now implement them into not only their own business, but the businesses they help. With your background as a Green Beret, with your time in the military and the time and things you've learned, and now in the entrepreneurial journey, can you talk about the impact of leadership, what you believe leadership is, and how you utilized your past experiences in your business today?
Definitely. So I came from a small ODA Green Beret team. We had 12 people on our team, and we would go to any country and work as a 12-man team. In Afghanistan in particular, we actually developed a Afghan fighting force of approximately 130 guys to go and work with us. And the whole process is all about training the people to the left and right of you and leading from the front. So the leadership side of everything we do is the focus, where we show them how to do it, we help them do it, and they do it themselves and we oversee it. And then the next thing, they can do it themselves and be comprehensive about it. And then they can also train the trainer. They can train somebody else in that too. And so if you take that in our security industry, our whole purpose of having law enforcement military is exactly that. Every single employee we have is a leader. And so we can put them at any job site working by themselves, and they will make good decisions. And not only will they make good decisions, they'll gather good information or intel on whatever is going on. And your team, your company is only as strong as your team. And so for us, little stuff, whenever I send a message out to all of our employees, I'll put team, and that's how I start it, because I want everybody to know that it's about the camaraderie. It's about the guy to the left and right of you. This is not a company structure that doesn't that operates on an organization chart. Even though we have one, we still are focused on everybody understanding that leadership is paramount. And once the leadership from employees is shown and valued, the employee appreciates it, and they appreciate the trust that the leadership of the company is instilling in them. And next thing you know, they start owning stuff, right? They own projects. I'll take care of this. I got this. I'll take care of the vehicles this week and have them ready for the football game. Like, it's all about passing off a task to somebody, giving them, task conditions, standards, and then letting them do it. And then once they do it, and not micromanage them, but once they do it and you can see that they can perform it, trust that they'll perform it. I mean, I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. We have 100+ employees in Minneapolis, and I haven't been up there this year, but yet we have ran 55,000 hours worth of work. That's 55,000 hours worth of opportunities of something bad happening, a shooting, an escalation of force of some sort, fights, whatever. Our agents get arrested. So there's so many things. But when we put together our team, it is all derived around building the leadership structure and training, and then focusing on making sure that there are quality assurance, quality control aspects built into place to manage people, right? For instance, our vehicles have software in them that can track if somebody's speeding, hits a curb, cameras in and out, audio. So you put those mechanisms in place, but the whole purpose of developing a team is to where you can train the trainer and build your leadership structure to where you can take yourself out of the equation. And I think that's really hard for company owners, because we are so controlling that we want to have our hands in every single aspect, and you can't. There's just not enough time in the day. And if you manage like that, you're going to really get employees to resent you. And I think that a part of the trust factor is, why did you hire the guy? You interviewed him, you did a background check, you looked at his resume, you may have had other people interview him in the company as well, and then you hired him. So you go through all of those steps to accept a guy, and then do a 30-day evaluation of him for his first 30 days. Once that's done, he's prior military or law enforcement, why can't you trust him to do what he's supposed to do until he fails?
Right.
And I think that's really hard for leadership or leaders and business owners to comprehend.
I think you're right. And you said that, nailed that. I mean, there's a cost to leadership, but there's a cost to the lack of leadership that's significantly worse. And I think it's probably 10 or 20 times the amount. Putting that training and education, investing that time, resources, software, cameras, there's a cost to that, sure. But it would cost you dearly if you didn't have the leadership in place and the principles in place and the training in place that would be even greater than that sunk cost. That's one time, So yeah. I think you said it well. I don't have anything I could even add to that. And I just love how you've leveraged the ultimate service to our country and others, and into a way that you're now benefiting not only the people that were served side by side for you, but you, yourself, your family, their families in the entrepreneurial journey. And you have such a great perspective of it and grasp of it. I just love hearing the story. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Appreciate your time. I'll see you on here again one day.
Yes, absolutely. So Nick, tell everybody how they can find you guys. How do you get to Integrous Solutions? If you have a business, if you need security, if you're in construction, if you have a job site, how do they contact you? What's the best way, and where can we keep in touch?
You can just contact me directly. So the website is www.integrourisksolutions.com. My email is rabenau@integrousrisksolutions.com. And my number is 910-638-8589. And I'll field all of it.
We're going to include all that information in the show notes, everybody. So don't worry. It'll be right down in the paragraph, wherever you're getting your podcast, wherever you're listening or watching us now. We'll include all that information right in the footnotes so you can get in touch with Nick. Nick, thank you so much. You and your team, you guys have been a great, not only for us here, a great customer of ours, but I just love getting to know you, and even more so now sharing your story. And I know people are going to love listening to this episode and learning that they're not abnormal, and you go through the same things. And I think your pathway of how you've done it is something to be admired, and just something that people should appreciate, that, you know, it's they're not alone, and just keep on going, and things get better and better. Yep,
that's right. I appreciate it.
All right. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Construction MF'ers. I'm Scott Pieper, CEO and co-founder of Mobilization Funding. If this episode has helped, please share it. If you found value in it, learned something new, anything at all, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find Nick or I on our LinkedIn, and then please share the show. Let everybody know where it's at, and I appreciate you subscribing. Till next time, may God bless you, and have a great day.